Thank you very much for ETP for inviting me to this wonderful show, Images of Encounter, which actually has 29 artists, which is quite exhaustive in number. Like especially if you are going to an actual gallery and looking at these many numbers of works in the physical space, I think it would take around 3 hours to see all these images in detail. So here, like, we are in a particular situation like the post or the COVID scenario or the post-COVID scenario. In this particular situation, most of us are turning into the digital platform, online platforms, and where but the new word webinar has become a kind of a new currency word. So it is wonderful to have such a show, and especially when I look at this particular show, Images of Encounter, which could be compared to so many other digital shows, which are online platform shows happening these days. This is meticulously done. This is very nicely displayed, and also there is no confusion for the viewer who comes in and looks for a sort of navigation online or digital navigation. Mr. Christopher Pinney, who is a great scholar, who has given a very nuanced talk on the particular show as well as the general aspects of photography. And it is a wonderful contribution. It's a great contribution and a great opening for this show. And it is a great honor done by Christopher Pinney to ETP. Anyway, now let me come to my little bit of speech or whatever, like my take on my observation on this particular show. So when I heard this word encounter, suddenly I remembered the first definition, like there's a surrealist definition brought towards by Andre Breton. He said that the images are as beautiful as a chance encounter between a sewing machine and an umbrella on an operation table, which is like a two disparate images coming together and collapsing the preconceived notions and the predetermined notions of viewing as well as presenting. So a new idea is born, a new visuality is born, and so on. That is the fundamental philosophy or manifesto behind the surrealist, surrealist movement. Also, much before that, like perhaps in the beginning of the 20th century, the Irish poet W.B. Yeats had said that a terrible beauty is born with the 20th century, which T.S. Eliot qualified as a heap of broken images. So coming back to the idea of photography and also this particular show, Images of Encounter, the word encounter actually pricks me a lot. The word encounter, even if ETP in its curatorial note hasn't mentioned anything more than the dictionary definition or the definition which could be pertained to or connected to the photographic events or photographic act. Here in India, encounter has today's world, especially in a political scenario where the right wing is actually making inroads, or the right wing is actually taking hold on most of the socio-cultural and political economic events, where encounter is something where the police force, without trial or without reason, without any further investigation, kill people, kill people in an encounter, and finishes off a particular case or particular evidence. So it is a way of silencing by the government or by the system of people who could speak out. So, what do photographers do in a particular scenario, when, especially when they use the word encounter, or when they are brought into a sort of a field or sort of context where encounter is the word? So, this encounter is something most of the photographers actually, as Mr. Pinney rightly pointed out, this is suddenly we always think about Cartier-Bresson, his decisive moment, the moment which is very decisive. And an encounter is that particular moment where you make that decisive moment. But for me, what that decisive moment is not important here, but what happened just before that, and what happened after that. And this particular photographic event or a photographic moment is one of the moments chosen by deliberately or accidentally by the photographer in order to register that particular moment or a particular event. But what that event or that moment which is registered in an analog or a digital photographic mode, which actually remains as a constant reminder of what has happened before and what has been happening before, and what would happen after that image is taken. Perhaps after the encounter, the physical or spiritual or emotional or whatever kind of encounter, what happened afterwards? After story has never been told, said by Bob Marley when he was singing one of the songs. The after story has never been told. Perhaps I feel that the photographs, even if they are the moments or the chance encounters, which creates a kind of surrealist feel, which are liable to talk a more about what is left for the future or what has to be interpreted by the future or in the future. And today, in the COVID scenario, we know that like everything has collapsed into images, either still images or moving images. Everything is into images. Like no longer we are moving in a physical space or making relationships or making encounters in the physical space. So physical space more or less has been, dispelled from our encounters, and the safe distance has, and the sanitized and sterilized contexts have been developed where we could sit from, we could come to a particular platform from different places and make an encounter. But a a technical problem could suddenly collapse the idea of this encounter, how we come together and how we engage between ourselves. So this particular aspect of encounter, which is actually at the brink of a collapse, is very neatly and very nicely, picked up by or kind of registered by David Bate in his series of photographs, like a mechanic or mechanic unconscious. Yeah. So it is a kind of machinery dysfunction or a kind of a machine collapse which happens accidentally, and that accident come as a kind of stand-in for the kind of accident collapse of the normality of events which has been happening in the pre-COVID days. So there is a sudden rupture, there is a sudden reality which is absolutely different from what we have been seeing just before that. And even if we are getting half of the things in the normal way, half is collapsed, half is distorted. So this is how one could read into a series of images that we see from these 29 artists present in this particular show. And I will actually quickly go through a few works. Like one is Martin Parr. He's a very famous photographer, as we know, and his this particular series, which is presented in the images of encounter, which is called Death by Selfie. So death by selfie is like I was like when I then Tulsi was talking about Mr. Christopher Pinney as Padma Shri Christopher Pinney. Then I was thinking like what we could qualify ourselves, or I could qualify myself as. Then I thought that I could call myself as a selfie Sri. Not Padma Shri, but selfie Sri, because we are all into selfie making. We are all registering ourselves. So there is a moment where we could put our life into jeopardy by placing ourselves into kind of a cliff or kind of brink of something which is a kind of line, a demarcating line which is invisible, which is slippery, which is collapsible at any time, between a sudden fall and a permanent escape or registration. So Martin Parr is talking about a series of selfie death, but here he is not showing the selfie, the moment of falling or the moment of collapse, but the act of selfie taking and the self-indulgence, the kind of encounter people make who become absolutely unconscious about the whole scenario around. They become absorbed into the screen, and also the kind of background that they want to project, and also a way of registering themselves. As in the case of Dinesh Khanna's photograph, the series of the which Sadish Sharma had once called rotigraphy, where he is talking more about colors, but we can understand that like how he is also making this registration along with the kind of rotigrapher who's a village photographer, and and trying to catch the emotions and the images of people in that particular given moment, which is standing opposite to the idea of selfie. So that is also an encounter, a sort of multiple encounter. Robert Nickelsberg, which is, I found that series of photograph where like he's going back to Gujarati village and he is clicking few photographs of those people, and he says that after say 60, 70 years of India's independence, the people remain the same. So the our first prime minister, directly or indirectly, Jawaharlal Nehru, directly or indirectly, sort of evoked this particular moment of encounter that today we have made a tryst with the destiny. So that is an encounter with the destiny. So after that encounter, also all these years passed and nothing happened to those poor farming people, the farmers. Their conditions remains the same. Then coming to Jan Cornier, uh, I found that like that Spanish evil festival, like people go to that village on a particular day, where this as in a Halloween performance, like they wear this very evil kind of, and that is also when we come to the whole idea of stereotypical representation of right and wrong, white and black, good and bad, ugly and beautiful, uh, and evil and pious, evil and divine. There the people are actually the normal people who like to live a divine life or a pious life, a holy life. But on that particular day, they come to appease, as in a kind of a reminder of the age-old traditions of tribal encounters with nature and the unknown forces, which actually happens in a way find reflection, resonances with Taha Ahmed, an Indian photographer who comes to Firozshah Kotla to see how people come to Firozshah Kotla to appease the genies, the jinns, what William Dalrymple and all called jinns. So I found that the curatorial intervention happens here in such a way where Yannick and Taha actually make a kind of encounter, a kind of a remote encounter using two different locations, two different activities, which has more or less the same connotations or same meaning, which runs back to many years in their tribal and traditional lives. Same is happening in a different way with the Behurupiyas, where T. Narayanan extensively photographs and portrays the Behurupiya people who impersonate as other people, as especially the divine heads who move around in the local. And also, like this is an encounter between the modern life, modernity, and the kind of traditional, what we call Margi and Deshi, which is classical. We are okay with the Bharatanatyam, the classical dance forms, etc. But the Deshi things, like the kind of vernacular, what we call the provincial, regional vernaculars, where they generate a sort of tension when they come together in an open space, in a secular space where fairs and festivals happen. Even if there is a larger background of a religious context, the activities, the people, or the encountering of the people happen mostly in a secular space, where these Behurupis function as a kind of very tenuous, very tentative, very brittle link between the modern and the pre-modern worlds, where the mythology and the history meets in a very uncomfortable platform. So then coming to Vineet Gupta is a young photographer. I have actually curated his works. Vineet Gupta's works are like the recent ones where the political intervention, the intervention of the system using its brutal force, with the help of hooligans, with the help of lumpen elements, and how they vandalize a particular place which was supposedly, or which is supposedly a sacred space, especially a classroom, a school, which is a sacred space, and where the people who don't give any value to education enter, which becomes a kind of an encounter between a sacredity in one level and a kind of blasphemy, a kind of desecration on the other level, and that leaves a lot of traces. And Vinith Gupta goes around and take the traces how a communal riot, a political riot, could result into a series of traces that actually leaves a lot of pain and stain of history, tears, memories, and so on and so forth. Then we have Punalur Rajan. I don't want to go deep into it. He has been living in. He went to Soviet Russia to study film shooting. I mean, to become a director. But then he came back. He never took a film. He never did a film. Instead, he went around and photographed in analog photography. He photographed all the cultural icons. You know, he did a great contribution, and we have all those particular black and white photographs here in this show. Same is case with Ram Rahman. Rahman's oeuvre is very much familiar to us. I'm particularly touched by this particular photographer from Iran. Actually, she worked in Iran. Her name is Lina Isa. Lina Isa actually. Perhaps that justifies all this word about encounter. Like her series is titled "The Bruises of Exodus." And we know Exodus is a factor today. Like even if it is coming from the kind of Judaic sense of Moses taking his people to the Holy Land, but the Exodus is happening in a day-to-day context. The constant migration happening from one place to another because of so many other reasons. People are forced to go into exile. And previously, when people go into exile, what they do is that they produce their own kind of cultural production. Here, they don't have the ability, or perhaps they don't have the devices and the materials, even context, to have that particular leisure time to produce their cultural registrations. So other people come in, especially photographers. They create this. They create that the moment of leaving the place, and that becomes more important because the people are living, and they are living a place which they have been living earlier, and they have a history created there, their own history, personal histories and memories, and they are living at that particular moment, that one moment, which I don't, personally speaking, I don't want to call it a decisive moment, because that is not decisive. Any moment taken in that whole exodus could be decisive, because every moment in the life of the immigrants could be as decisive as any other moment. Then I'm particularly drawn towards by Xia Jieping. I'm sure that I'm I'm pronouncing it right. Like the Dors Empire. When I was looking at this Dors Empire, maybe this photographer Peng had gone to this particular island where they have their own, their own kingdom, or a kind of country with their own king, their own subjects and the rules and all those things. It could be a kind of extended utopia or imagined utopia, or a kind of thinking from the other side. It could be a dystopia, which is absolutely distorted, but real when we go and make an encounter there. It looks like a make-believe world, and the people who have been expelled or kind of excluded from the mainstream life because of their short-sightedness or their distortion in their physical existence become the major players, the major movers and shakers in a particular given situation where they are the rulers. So normal become abnormal, normal become absurd when somebody enters there. So actually, the sense of proportion, the sense of scale, the sense of height, width, breadth, and all these dimensions change in that particular place. And in that place, they create their own normality, which is extensively documented by Penn. And I found that those are planned encounters. They are planned encounters, but they have a sense of truth, a sense of essence in it, like existence in it. So I found that thing very interesting. Then uh, one wonderful project in this show is Rania Matter. She's a Lebanese photographer, and what I found is like she goes because she was caught in the COVID situation, like lockdown situation. She goes out. She calls out her friends and say that like I am coming to your place, keeping the social distance, using mask and sanitize and this 3 meter distance and so on. I'm going to take photograph of yours, so you could actually enact what you want. So these have become the portraits of the people, first initiated by created a kind of artificial encounter between a photographer who comes to photograph and the subjects who are willingly or unwillingly or kind of tentatively posing for it. Later on it becomes a full-fledged uh, play or a kind of act the subjects themselves put on, so that they decide what could be the kind of image that they want to project to the world behind the window. And the window becomes a strong marker, like that becomes a demarcating point. Like in India, we when we talk about social distancing because of the caste system, the age-old caste system, we are not actually surprised by the social distancing, because social distancing is happening in a virtual space here, though in the urban spaces, which has been collapsed considerably. But it is happening in the mental space. But in a European situation, in a foreign situation, when we look from here, we see that this social distancing is a new game, a new play, something quite kooky and strange, which they could happily enact and become. And this is where I remember a series done by Parthiv Shah when he was in Britain. He went to study, I think, like on a Charles Wallace scholarship. He asked the Indian people, the Indian diaspora there, he selected a few people and asked them to prefer a place where they could take this photographer could go and take their photographs. So some people were sitting in their toilets and reading books. Some people were in the kitchen. Some people were in their drawing room. Some people were watching television. Some people were reading very deeply in their study. They were playing. Somebody was in the gym, and so on. So actually, the subject himself or herself decides what should be the image, which is actually a reversal of roles, where most of the situation, we know that the documentary photographs are mostly candid, where the photographer's presence is very tenuous and tentative, where like his presence or her presence is like a kind of invisible kind of phantom, phantasmagoric or something like that. So this aspect is collapsed by the reversal. And also Parthiv Shah recently during the lockdown days, he sent out an email saying the people, asking the people to take their own selfies in the preferred corners of their houses or the places of their isolation or quarantine, and with a description sent to him. So I'm sure that like Parthiv Shah also must be building up that particular series. Then I like this photography series by Arun Inham, A Canvas of Motion. Arun Inham is an artist, a performer, an actionist, an art director, and so on. And he creates a space where he makes certain interpolations, as if he is involved in a sort of graffiti making, where the existing images are turned into something more, some images which could convey more than what they really mean. And it becomes a kind of a solitary space where he could enact his anarchic engagement with the given space, or even a planned movement between images and the interpolatory acts. So it is more or like a Jackson Pollock acting, and where Jackson Pollock, I think, like his photographs were taken by Hans Namuth. But here, Arun Inham himself was like, after the interpolation, he was disengaging himself from the act and taking the photograph, which is also like Saravat Ghosh's Boxed. That there's a series called Boxed, where we could see him photographing the places of corporate offices, the boxes, the confined spaces, what we call the famous cubicles. So he is taking a series of photographs. So I thought Arun Ingham and Sarawat Ghosh were also creating a kind of a different level connection. Then my dear friend Alex Fernandez, I had curated his show earlier. Again, taking a leaf from his earlier project called the Theatrist, where the traditional performers of the Goan popular theatre. He picks up two famous, artists who are caricaturists, actors, trained actors, satirists, and so on. And he looks at his own engagement with these people, their actions, their acts, even if like they are asked to enact a particular scene in a real like. Inka Shonibare, a British black artist, like him, he creates the scenarios. Alex Fernandez also creates a kind of very classical scenario for his, photography. And slowly, according to Alex Fernandez, he has recognized the way he has created these characters, and they are very akin to, similar to, and corresponding to the image repertoire created by Mario Miranda, the well-known Goan caricaturist and cartoonist. So picking and choosing from that, he has created a series of works called Goan archetypes. Goan archetypes become so important because these are the two actors. They actually, it could be connected to Bahrupia of T.S. Narayan. So we can see that how these two things are connected. One is in a controlled space, which the other is not in a controlled, which is in a kind of in an open space. In this controlled space, Alex Fernandez, other aspect is his encounters are very minimal. Alex Fernandez is not a prolific photographer as much as I understand. Maybe in 5 years he creates one series. He is a kind of quintessential Goan who could actually delve on one song, one beer, one brand of beer, and one set of photograph, or photographic image. So that's a wonderful series that I found, that the Goan stereotype, and I'm sure that which is going to become even sculptures in the popular sculptures in future, which I have a feeling that there is a tendency to turn those inanimate photograph, two-dimensional images into three-dimensional animated sculptures. And of course, Sunil Gupta, we have Mukul Roy is a famous woman photographer, Nick Koza. And then finally, I would like to zero in, wind up this whole talk with Abul Kalam Azad series, which is very interestingly called Sentimental Memories and Histories Trapped in a Kaleidoscope. As Mr. Pinney has rightly pointed that there is always a chance of history reworking itself. Memories, we know that memories have the tendency to rework, constantly rearrange and create new narratives, which is more comfortable to us. We have this tendency, especially the black people have this tendency to go to some place and create memories. They create memories because they have a long history of slavery where they couldn't create history. So they couldn't create memory. They couldn't create family. So they are very solidly knit, very closely knit family systems, and they make memories deliberately through the backyard parties, and or even their brawls are making memories, perhaps. So here, memories have this tendency for us, we don't have even if we were colonial subjects, we don't have that much a cruel past, so we don't have to create memories deliberately. But whatever memories we have this tendency to rework. The memories have this automatic tendency as residues working on its own dynamics to create new narratives which could comfort us if we are very optimistic. If we are pessimistic, the same memory traces could actually put us into deep depression. Here, memories and the histories, Azad makes histories are not couldn't be really reworked. Only when a fascist government comes in, it could actually rework history. But here, memories and histories actually sometimes mingle, maybe they transgress, they cross over and create a sentimental mixture of things, which could be like a kaleidoscopic view, because in kaleidoscope we are not seeing a predetermined pattern. It could anytime it could change and it collapse the kind of predeterminacy that we have about history. So there is always a chance of something coming back and creating a new narrative. And also there is this kind of very precarious situation where a solid looking image could just go out. So he has gone into the old photographs and also the dying local studios and all. He has picked so many images and created this a new narrative of history and memory. So with this, I just wind up my talk. So, but hello. So anyway, I want to just to point out one more thing, just to make one more point and to finish it off. This is about the truth value of photograph. With photographers, when they click, they always say that like we are creating a sort of truth. The moment is a true moment. And today, in the post-truth world, I don't think that like we could create a truthful moment, a true moment, because this true moment could be manipulated in terms of like changing our, like for example, I will give you a simple example. Like there is still going on deep contention. Who took that photograph of a dying child or dead child, which is almost semi buried in the Bhopal gas tragedy in 1994, which is Pablo Bartholomew or is Draco Roy or is Aruna Roy or Mughal Roy, or there are so many questions because so many photographers have done it. So there we can't pinpoint one particular truth, but there is a truth. There is a truth in it. But that truth could be identified only by the ethical stance of the artist, of the photographer who holds the camera. He could hold a camera to create a falsehood. He could create a photograph. He could hold a camera to create a false narrative and change the course of events, and also to mislead the people. That is why we have today fake detectives. Similarly, I insist that whatever kind of encounter, especially the word encounter itself is in a very critical situation, in a precarious sense, which stands at the kind of crossroads of history, which has lost all its innocent meanings and has become a kind of very cruel, brutal, system-based, systemic power-based meaning. We have to say that the person who holds the camera has to have this ethical mooring so that he or she could anchor himself or herself into truth, and say that like what I take is true, as we swear in the codes that what I show is truth, what I click is truth, and I will only click truth. Thank you very much. Thank you, ETP, for inviting me, and also I wish you all the best for this show. Thank you, Christopher Pinty, all my friends who have been listening to me. Thank you very much.